Anyhow, since we are a bit late, I suggest that we start this session. Our first presenter is Daniela Andren. And just to say something about she's an associate professor at Orebro University School of Business and has 20 years experience in empirical social research. So I hope your presentation will be okay.
Thank you. And it is a great pleasure to be here, and I'm very pleased to hear especially about the progress of these countries. It is impressive, and I wish you a lot of luck. Yes, I have actually more than 20 years of experience of working with data, and actually with almost all type of quantitative data. Just now, I work with a lot of different type of data, and my research, only to give you a little flavor of using different data. I'm analyzing state dependence in social assistance in Sweden, and I do this for 1990s. And actually, I got an email that one of the paper using this data, it's just published. I knew that it was accepted for publication. And another one, it's on pipeline. This data belong to the Swedish National Data Service. And I use this data for several years, and I'm very, very pleased of having this opportunity to use such a good documented data and get a lot of good support in this used. And I will come back to this because my history of using data start not with the archive. Actually start with my second project, part-time still live in Sweden, using also longitudinal data, which is owned by Swedish Social Insurance Agency register, which is supplemented with survey data. This data belong to this authority. And in order to use this data today, you can get access of part of the data by Statistics Sweden, but you cannot use all data if you are employed by this agency. And this I did now. I had to do this deal to work part-time with them, and this I'm doing. The third project, which is very exciting, but requires, like all of you who work now with developing data, required a lot of effort. It's analyzing the effect of manager gender for Swedish firms. And the focus and what is actually critical for my research is to use this employer-employee data. And I do this using the microdata online system developed by Statistics Sweden, which is the portal what the Swedes system has. And not the last interest, I'm analyzing Romanian migration after the second EU enlargement. Unfortunately, it is difficult to access the microdata, what I need for this analysis. I got access to a lot of aggregated data, but in order to do the kind of research what I got used to do, I need access to this microdata which actually exist in the country. Other relevant activities for this meeting today: since January 2009, I'm a member of one of the 6 regional boards which deal with vetting the ethics of research that involves humans. And this aspect is very interesting because theoretically all research which touch 4 variables, health, country of birth, ethnicity, and religion, should have a screening, ethical screening. And this is not a difficult screening, I have to say, because the screening has a focus balancing what is research and what it is the potential negative effect on the individual, on the privacy or on sensitive information. And now a little bit about how I start to work with data and why I believe that is very important for the researcher to have access to data, and especially to this archive data. In 1994, I started working with a rich longitudinal database, what belonged to the National Social Insurance Board. At the same time, it is I make now a little parallel about institutional settings about using data in Sweden. And in 1994, this kind of organization, what we say from centralization to giving more flexibility, was developed. And now are about 24 authorities, which actually all of them have registered data. And registered data, it is at the individual level. It is the Social Insurance Board, it is the Board for Wealth and Health in Sweden, it is the even data about criminality, for example. Unemployment agency also have data, and many of these authorities have registered data and they manage their data. And I said I was a user, and I still am a user of one of these authorities, which have a lot of data on all individuals to belong to the register. In 1998, I started to work with data which belonged to what became the National Data Service. It was owned by Gothenburg University, where I was doing my PhD studies. And here I will stay a little bit to tell you what I consider as a researcher that is very useful in Sweden to use such a data. It was a professor who decided this data, and I was interested about some aspect about active labor market program in Sweden. And I access him that I like to use his data. And this is very useful. It is learning by doing. First of all, it is a senior researcher with much more experience than a PhD student, which keep me informing about what has been done. And also, at the same time, he gave me all freedom to try new paths for my research. And it was also the possibility to interact with other people who have access to the data. And also, what was for me very, very useful, it was the documentation of the data. This data is longitudinal. And one of the researchers at S&D told me the story that it was one point in time when the gender variables was coded from 0 to 1. 0 was women and 1 was men. And now for the feminist perspective, it was a little bit bad that woman was the 0, the null. And was decided that the data will be coded with 1 and 2. But that was not very, very fast updated. And researchers start to get results about, wow, the gender aspect seems to change a lot from one year to another year. No, it was only the code in the data. And this I want to tell you what is very good in my perspective as user of Swedish data. And also I have to say, in my presentation, I'm very pleased and I'm very lucky to have this situation, but I want to point out some aspects what you have to think about. And when I start to use access data from Statistics Sweden, which by the way was part, and they was getting this data, what is today at SND. This data is not documented. It is a list of variables, and also it is in the server, it is the original data. If it is a mistake in the data, it's not changed. And it is only the researcher, and now we have online user forum to inform each other about mistakes which are going on. This platform, the access system, remote access to the data, it is developing and improving. But just now, it is not documented. It is also the fact that the procedure of getting data and the access to the variables and also the time of using the data, it is a little bit too bureaucratic, I consider, but it will improve. And I consider that we should learn from different possibilities and alternatives. But just now, like it is using 3 different systems, my favorite is SND, the archive data. Here it's only a little picture, if I have 3 minutes, okay? Only about the data in which register they are. Today this so-called LISA is longitudinal individual data. It is taking information from several registers. And part of this register, they are information in SND archives, but they don't have access to all population. And this is LISA doing. You have access to all population. Yes, the remote access, researchers have access via secure connection and work with the data, analyze the micro data, which stay at the servers. But be aware, people like me who does simulation could have problems because my programs run like 24 hours or 36 hours until I get convergence. And then I cannot be on the server. But thanks to SND, I can work with these simulations on data from archive, but not on remote access. But where are the very good service offered by SND? And all these online users are asking these questions, what I try to put out, and we have to think all about this. Coding and documentation of the data, understanding my data sometime in the future, because that it is when we want to compare things over the timeline. And it is very important to remember about details and about institutions, because these variables are very much connected to changes in the institutions. Sharing my research data to increase the visibility of my work. Yes, it is true, and it is not only for this citation. It is, as a researcher, you always like to get more development into ideas, what you have. And not to the end, what happened with my research data after the project. Thank you for the attention, for your attention, and I would like you to ask questions just now because I'm forced to run to the airport. Thank you very much, and please don't forget, if you have any question, you can email me and I do my best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. So if there are some questions, if you could ask them now. Okay. If not...
I hope that you send emails. Okay, thank you a lot. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I cannot invite next speaker since there were some technical problems, but I would like to ask Hilary to step in on Tony's behalf and present the presentation.
Okay. Well, not only am I not Matthew or Peter, I'm now not Tony either. I will try and keep within time. I do have a crib sheet just in case. Tony apologises. He really very much would have liked to have been here, but unfortunately in the end he couldn't. So he's titled his presentation. He's from the Office for National Statistics in the UK. The Office for National Statistics and the Archive work really closely together and have done for a number of years, which is why I'm reasonably confident in agreeing to give this paper. I will try and answer questions at the end, but if I can't, I'll just give you his email address. So, okay. Right. For those of you who don't know, this is just a quick summary about the Office for National Statistics. It's the government's single largest statistical producer in the UK. It's the internationally recognised National Statistics Institute for the UK, and it's the executive body of the UK Statistics Authority, which is responsible for promoting and safeguarding official statistics within the UK. Their mission is to improve understanding of life in the UK and enable informed decisions to be made by providing trusted, relevant and independent statistics and analysis. And it's quite interesting, as an aside here, that he's used the word trusted, which picks up the theme that I had through my talk. ONS data, they produce 285 unique statistical releases. I think that's the annual figure, but I'm not absolutely confident of that. We can check it later if you wanted to. These include the 10 yearly census for England and Wales, inflation measures, national accounts including GDP and balance of payments, and population and migration statistics, employment measures, health, social and vital statistics. Now, this slide is designed to highlight the distinction between published statistics, which are, if I can use this correctly, which are the tables that cover these sorts of areas, and the reports, so these highlight figures and sometimes sort of this kind of activity, compared with, sorry about this. There we go. Let me try again. Okay. Compared with the unpublished data, which are the underlying data, which tend not to be published. Okay. And it's a balance here. Oops. Oh, sorry. Well, you can see the balance at the top: open data and privacy. Clearly, there are materials, data that can be made readily and easily available. Published statistics obviously are, but anything below the tabular level, you have to be careful about the aspects of privacy and data protection. So, a snapshot of data access from the Office for National Statistics perspective. They have since 2008, they've approved over 2,600 researchers for approved access. This is to more sensitive data. They've had over 1,200 uses of VML and SDS in the last year, and I'll just briefly explain. VML is the Virtual Microdata Laboratory, which is ONS's own secure access system, the on-site ONS offices, and SDS is what is now the UK Data Service Secure Access Mechanism. It was previously known as the Secure Data Service, and it was one of those individual services that's now been combined under the single service. They released over 11,000 unpublished sets of data for statistical research last year. So what's driving the Office for National Statistics in wanting to make their data more readily available? A whole list of things. We are moving nationally, policy-wise, towards open data. There's a strong feeling amongst within UK government that the more data that can be made available, the better. They're collected with public funds, and it enables and encourages people to use those data if they're made more visible. The legal framework has changed since 2008 with the Statistics and Registration Act, which includes a statement to promote and assist research by providing access to data where it is lawful to do so. So some of the mechanisms that are in place are designed specifically to deal with particular legal issues to ensure that the data are legally available for research. Impact and public policy, they have a remit to encourage and promote policy-related research, and given that their main function is to provide data and statistics, they see the making available of those statistics as a means to the end of promoting impact and policy. There are some European drivers. ONS is a partner to the Data Without Boundaries project that we have talked about earlier, and they are also involved in a Eurostat project, Decentralised and Remote Access DARA. So those also are encouraging them to make data more readily available, more easily available. So how do they provide data access services? Access to data, they see it as enabling and supporting. It enables their business areas, and for business areas you could read those government departments that I mentioned earlier today. So for example, Department of Health, the Home Office, who actually collect data outside of the Office for National Statistics itself, or they sometimes have administrative data that they collect. They want to enable those departments to make the data more accessible. So the group that Tony works for is actually working with individual departments to encourage them to make their data more available. And the idea is that it will support research within the community more extensively than just within government departments or within government. And they work within a legal framework and assurance. When he says assurance there, he's talking about security. It's about ensuring respondents that their data are not going to be made publicly available in a way that is inappropriate or outside of the law. This looks really complex, but actually it picks up nicely some of the themes that I mentioned this morning. If you look at it, now let's see if I can make this work this time. Yes, right. Here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of groups across the top, and these are almost virtually the equivalents of the 4 different levels of data access that I was talking about this morning. So the ONS source data are not going to be made available for research. Almost without question they won't be because of their sensitivity. When you move to here, you can have access to some of the materials through remote access or secure centres, such as the VML and the secure service from Essex, or in the safe room at Essex. And then here we have the approved researcher, which was the step where researchers have to have training to understand what the implications are of them using these data and understanding the importance of anonymisation techniques, etc. Although they shouldn't need to use them significantly because the data are already substantially anonymised. So that's another of the routes that we have. And then the end user license, which I mentioned, and this is the open government license where data are freely available without any conditions. Now, what ONS would like to do is to shift this red line, which is the most easy method of access, slightly this way, so the end user license, because they're already anonymised and because the conditions are very, very light, they're not hugely significant, to move those into this area so that there are more data available here rather than shifting this line this way, which some people would like to do. this is the important other line. For data where they're confident that they are anonymized and there are no serious risks of disclosure, or probably no risks of disclosure, they are more than happy to distribute data. But here, where there is sensitivity, they distribute access rather than distributing data. So the data stay in one place on a server, protected, but the access is available remotely from different places under control conditions. Working with others, if he was here, I'd have an argument with him because it nicely describes what I was talking about for the new service, because here in the middle we've got the UK Data Service, and this organisation, the ESDS, this census, the Secure Data Service, are actually all being subsumed into this. So until very recently, these were all individual different mechanisms under which, or organisations with which ONS worked in order to make data available. Every one of these has data from ONS within them to make them available. But we just deal now with the single organisation. And then the other organisations, the ESRC is our funding council, and they work with the ESRC to help to fund research that does some data collection exercises. They also work with DARA. I mentioned DARA is the European Statistics Institute project that's going on, and DWB. So how do they provide data access services? Through strategic partnerships. They've worked with the UK Data Archive for over 40 years. We have, they have with us just, we signed a new Concordat, which is an agreement which covers lots of different aspects of data provision. So it's basically an agreement between them and us to enable us to make data available through, on their behalf. For the future, they want to strengthen and expand the Concordat so that it covers more areas. And there is a new initiative, an administrative data task force, which has just reported in the UK. And the idea there is that there will be 4 centres, 4 regional centres, which will provide research facilities for administrative data, which will be secure services, remote access sites, and ONS is anticipating working closely with us when that system is promoted and put in place. We don't quite yet know how it's going to work out. It's very new, but something is going to happen, and they expect to work with us on that. So what are the benefits of data access services? For the producers, for ONS, it allows secondary analysis of data that they've already collected. It opens up, as Dennis said this morning, the opportunity for researchers to find new ways of using data that perhaps were never even considered when the data were originally collected. It leads to innovation, potentially. So exploitation and reuse of the data, and the public benefit of having those data out there available, and the opportunities for them to be used for new purposes. It helps to benefit ONS and helps them to achieve their vision. Their argument is that unpublished statistics, they'll make their data available in lawful and secure manner for research whilst maintaining the privacy of respondents, plus informed researchers. They listen to researchers and understand how best to harness their portfolio of unpublished statistical data for research, leads to public benefit, to facilitate statistical research that improves our knowledge of society, helping to make informed decisions that deliver public benefit. And for the researcher, they have more detailed data available for research, hopefully therefore better research, and the opportunity to shape and influence policy. Okay.
So Thank you, Hilary, for these presentations. If there are some questions, perhaps.
I'll try and answer them.
Yeah.
But
no? Then perhaps you could email also to Tony. I think all the emails of presenters will be available later on. So yes, thank you.
yeah, okay.
Now I would like to invite our two last speakers, if they could join the floor. Yeah. The colleague from Slovenia, Miran Lavrič. He holds a PhD in sociology and works as an assistant professor at the University of Maribor. He specialized in cross-cultural studies in the area of religiosity and in methodology of social research. His research also focused on the role of religion in the area of former Yugoslavia.
Yes, it is.
And the other presenter of these talks will be Sergej Flere, who is a retired full professor in sociology. He also taught here at the University of Novi Sad, if I know this correctly. He is an author of numerous theoretical and research texts in various areas of sociology, mostly dealing with the area of Yugoslavia. So, please.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. We've been far north, we've been far west, and now we are coming closer to Belgrade. So I'm just a simple researcher and teacher assistant from University of Maribor from Slovenia, and I want to talk about my experience with the Slovenian Social Data Archive, ADP, so I will call it ADP, how it impacted my professional work, and then Professor Flere will say something about what this means for sociology in the region. He has much more experience than I do, knowledge in sociology, and he has also recently published a paper on the state of sociology in post-Yugoslav, ex-Yugoslav countries. So first, perhaps, I would like to say that I am in no way institutionally linked to the ADP. I found about it through internet, so to speak, as a young researcher, eager to find something like that. Professor Flere was my mentor, and he had me study, perhaps some people from Belgrade know, the book from Dr. Vojin Milic, Sociological Method, and Vojin Milic, it is a book from 1965. He contains, at the beginning of the book, he states major problems in sociology, and the first one is, in his opinion, the lack of systematic gathering of data and data keeping, so that comparative research could be done, comparisons between societies and longitudinal comparisons. So we were then in 21st century already, and I was eager to find out about what possibilities were there now, 40 years after this book was published. Yes, and I found the ADP and began using its data, and I've been using them more and more since that time. It was in 2002, and ADP was developing in this time through all this period. So I want to focus on two areas: how it helps my professional work as a researcher and how it helps my professional work as a teacher. Now, as a researcher, of course, it helps me get survey data, high quality survey data, which most of all help me monitor social change. It is very important to compare societies in different times and compare societies between each other. And I want to just skip these few lines to show you some examples from one of our latest surveys, from one of our latest studies. It was called Youth 2010. So it was about youth in Slovenia. It was a national research, and it was very well received, both from the subscriber, that was the Ministry of Education, and the professional public and the general public as well. And I think that it was so well accepted, mostly because we really offered a lot of comparisons in time and space, and a lot of those comparisons were possible due to the ADP. Mostly within one project that is probably most important within ADP, that is Slovene public opinion poll. So we have systematic gathering of sociologically relevant data on a representative sample of Slovenians since 1968 for each year, and you can make comparisons in time. And there is, we have here one comparison. You probably don't see the numbers, but it is not so important. What we can see, for instance, from this SJM data, so I will call them SJM data, Slovensko javno mnenje, SJM. What we can see that, for instance, in 1990, there was about 45% of young people living in villages in Slovenia, and in 2008, there was 51% of them living in villages. It is kind of surprising data. You would expect urbanization, but it seems that the opposite is taking place in Slovenia. We know that due to ADP, and it raises a lot of important sociological questions. We don't have time to go into that. Now, this spider web is the only thing that Professor Flere commented when he saw my presentation. He said, I never liked those spider webs. I'm no fan of them either, but I want to tell you, I want to stress another benefit that we get from the ADP. And that is when we are creating questionnaires, we can get a lot of ideas from survey data that is available through ADP. For each survey, questionnaire is also available. So when we were researching the employment of young people, we took, I think that 9 items are here from 2005 survey from SJM, and used them in our survey in 2010, and we have a comparison. The yellow line, I don't know if you can see, is closer to the center, which basically means that Slovene youth has become more flexible workforce in these 5 years. They are prepared to do more things to get a job. And here's another comparison regarding values of young people, so which values are now more important than in 1992, I think, and which are less. It is very clear trend. Work and politics are getting less and less important for young people, and leisure time, friends and family getting more and more important. Also very relevant, sociologically very relevant finding with very simple statistical methods, so it is not very complicated, but I think that the richness of the data themselves and the reliability of these data is more important for many sociological issues than the very complicated statistics. Not for all, of course. So this is the first benefit. The second one is that I can clearly see what kind of data I'm dealing with. So just an example, I have here a description, just a small part of description of one of the surveys that we used. You can really get a clear picture about the population that the survey refers to, the sample techniques that were used. So it is very clear about what kind of data you're dealing with, and this is, of course, vital for the quality of your research. Another important issue is that ADP, for me, are the ones to call. So it's very important to have telephone number of a person which can help you when you are in grave need of certain data. So perhaps it was a month or 2 ago when newspaper called me to comment something about Catholic Church, and I had the feeling that it was somehow connected with the rise of the declining church attendance, but I had no recent data to support my claim. So I called Professor Stebe, and then he gave me contact of Irena. And we solved the issue within a few hours. So the next day, the data were in our newspaper. So it is really great feeling to have such a phone number in the address book. No, last but not least, as Professor Stebe, he used the phrase that when you donate your data to ADP, it becomes a high-class scientific object. I like the phrase, so yes. We want to share our data, researchers in general. Someone said that unpublished science is that science, so I would paraphrase this: unpublished data is, or it tends to become that data, so it is good to share the data, and we do donate all our data, which are of good quality, to the ADP. And yes, we get these bibliographical citations, which are important to get research funding in the end from the government agencies. So yes, you get this bibliographical unit, and then you can even be cited in Web of Science or something. So this is another benefit for me as a researcher. As a teacher, just a very simple example from my lecture from last week. I was talking to my students about secularization, so the declining of religiosity in Western societies. And I was quickly able to find data from Slovenian opinion poll about what is going on. And it is very easy to see here that church attendance, yes, it is falling, but belief in God, it is rising. So I was able to clearly illustrate my point that religion in modernity is transforming rather than declining. But I think Professor Flere disagrees with that, but that is normal in sociology. So I think it is a very good resource for any teacher of social sciences to have these data easily accessible. And I also teach research methods. And in my seminars, I make students do things like this. So I tell them, you have to find, they must be able to find data on something which I give them a task. For instance, this student had a task to find data how attitudes towards socialism have changed during the transition period in Slovenia. So he has to know where to find this kind of data. Is it Statistical Office of Slovenia? Is it Eurostat? Is it ADP? This task demanded my student to go to ADP and to find the data, which are quite easy to find. There is a search engine. You just type in socialism. You'll find all the surveys that dealt with socialism. And so this is concrete performance of a concrete student. So he found this, and he has to be able, of course, to export this data to Excel and then make some graphs and prepare visual presentations. So here's what he found, and I think this is sociologically very relevant. We can see that the attitude towards socialism is more and more positive in Slovenia, has been since 1993 towards 2009, and I bet you that in 2013 it is even more positive. So yes, it is interesting, and I think there is a great danger for social methods classes to become dull, so students tend not to like them. This helps me to make them more motivated, to create some kind of research spirit in them, because they are dealing with real data, and we also try to make some interpretations, although they are in the first year, so these interpretations are not very sophisticated. Okay, just to show you that we are not dealing just with very simple descriptive statistics. They have to also, for instance, compute correlations through this Nestar. You probably all know the online application. And the student made through Nestor this correlation of socialism with different demographic variables, and basically found out that correlations were either very small and significant, or they were not even significant. So there are not huge differences between social groups in Slovenia regarding the attitudes towards socialism, and that is also sociologically relevant finding and something that motivates our students to work with numbers with more vigor, so to speak. Yes, in conclusion, so I was talking about two areas. Within the research, we get easy to get high quality survey data, transparent data, and we get a channel for distribution of data, and also our work then becomes a high-class scientific object. The second area I was talking about is teaching. First, teaching any sociological course or social science course. It is good to illustrate your points with real data, and they are easy to get now for any teacher. And it is the second part of this issue is it is very good tool for making social science, social methods courses more interesting and also more useful, because students in later years can use this knowledge and really prepare good seminars when they prepare seminars at sociology of religion, sociology of family, or whatever. This is knowledge which is really useful, not some abstract, complicated statistics that they, most of them never use again. So I would end here. Just perhaps to say that I think that this is a very good development for sociology. I believe that sociology should be an empirical, or at least also an empirical science. I believe that Professor Flere agrees with me on that one, and I will just skip the word, let the word to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting. We are running, I am the very last speaker today, and I wouldn't want to burden you with what I had in mind initially, and that is to give a few illustrations of how quantitative research had changed from 1964, when 500 meters from here, in my experience, I collected data on the occupational, gender, and age structure of deputies of the then federal parliament, which was done manually, processing was done manually, statistics were very poor, and so on. And later, when the very first computer in Belgrade appeared, and so on and so on, I will not speak on this. I will just, as I know that you are rather, that you may be tired, I will note, and I will indicate one word here, the word regional. We are dealing here with data depositing, which we have seen that is in this region very well done in Slovenia. However, in Slovenia is not as shining as it may seem from what has been said, and the financial funds for scientific work have been diminishing. So what I would want to put forward here in the presence of the foreign, shall I say, potential benefactors, is I will recall the lady from Bosnia who said, we have 3 languages in Bosnia. yes, you have 3 languages in Bosnia, but linguistically it is really 1 language, according to the rules of linguistics. And the basic rule of linguistics is the basic rule as to identifying whether a language is whether the words from 1 to 7 are identical. Not to go further into this issue. What I want to say is that, as my predecessor said, there was a certain, now late, having passed away, Professor Vojin Milic, and there were other investigators, scholars, collectors of data, authors of good scholarship in the social sciences, in economics, for example, Professor Branko Horvat, and his school, I can say. And today, the states of the former Yugoslavia are underdeveloped countries as to depositing, archiving social science data. Even though you have all heard how conflictual these states, and even inside states, entities within states are, in the failure of existence of a depository in any other state, except Slovenia, with a further exception of a nativity of one, which was mentioned, I would suggest that it be considered that a regional archive be constituted. Returning to that issue, I would suggest, if no other consensus can be achieved, that it be in English. Of course, what I want to say is that there is a language which I shall not nominate, which is understood by within the former Yugoslavia, with the possible exception of Kosovo. We know almost nothing of Kosovo here. So I would plead for benefacting that there have been, I have not mentioned, in the former Yugoslavia, there have been precious data sets, investigations going back to the 60s. They are to be found somewhere in Belgrade, like the fears of the Yugoslavs. No one knows about that one anymore. But in the 80s, there are data sets which are, I shall say, precious for the scientific point of view, for all political science, public opinion, and particularly sociological studies, even ethnological studies. So, to my mind, in this situation, what comes is a regional social science data archives. Thank you.
Thank you to the speakers. Are there any questions? Here, Leila has one question or comment. We'll see.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation, and in particular to our last speaker. I just want to sort of defend my position. Constitutional in Bosnia, we have mention of 3 languages. I agree with you that we all speak one language we cannot mention here, and that it is completely understandable. So from that perspective, it is very different than the case that the Swiss have. But for reasons of political nature, this is the way we have to function. Thank you very much for suggesting the establishment of a regional social science data archive or data services. I must admit, when you started the whole introduction talking about how it should be, that you were going to suggest that we don't establish one, but that we use the Slovenian one, which is something also that we have been used to in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? So I think we came to the conclusion of the day. Thank you, speakers. Before you all run away, I would just like to make 2 additional comments. One is that tomorrow we start at 10, and tomorrow we will hear talks about open access, so you're all most welcome to join us. And another thing is about the dinner tonight. The dinner is scheduled between 18 and 20, but we suggested the whole group meet at 7, so we can follow on the discussions that we started here. Yeah. So this is it. Yeah.